We're live again, and yeah, today with us is Sam Scott. And the first question: what you're currently building, Sam? And it will be really great if you will introduce a little bit yourself, and of course share some experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on your podcast. So we're motivated to create a system that will help people living with diabetes to make sense of their data so that they can become more physically active and get the best out of their continuous glucose monitor data. So we recognize that there is an enormous push towards availability of wearable devices from watches, sleep trackers, also nutrition tracking apps, alongside diabetes uh, kind of wearables such as continuous glucose monitors, other medical devices as well, but they're not talking to each other. And this real need to simply put the data together and then provide actionable insight from that.
What I'm currently observing, not only like with your product, but with a lot of different products as well, is that currently people are building products that's actually aggregating like different data from different, let's say, third-party applications or wearables, and and this is actually what are you also trying to do, right? Because when I used an application and just tried to explore it, analyze it, so basically you have a long list of applications, devices that you actually could connect to the application and actually to have all this data that will be aggregated like in one place. And based on this data, you could provide like additional insights to the people with diabetes about the glucose level.
Yeah, absolutely. This was the first phase to what we wanted to do. So first thing was data availability and simplicity in terms of the way in which that was brought in and then overlaid together. So that was something that we wanted to make so that users would not require any instructions. It would happen within a few seconds, all of your data coming together. The next level that will be part of this is more around trends, kind of filtering different types of exercise, displaying that to the user. For example, when you walk your dog, or you do yoga, or you go to the gym, what is the common trend that you see in your glucose data based on additional factors that are coming into play, such as the nutrition that you had, the insulin that was taken in context of that, so that people can have better information around that. And then third will be taking this information and this data to have AI powered insights, whether this is exercise training plans that take into account glucose data as well and help you adapt based on that, or whether it's suggestions or other insights based on how you are doing exercise or training.
I'm wondering regarding the idea to have all data in one place. Basically, how did you came up to this idea? Was it something that you actually saw as a vision from the very beginning, or did you come to this vision like when you already started to build the product itself?
Yeah, so just probably to give a bit of information about who I am and who also my team are as well. So my background is in exercise physiology. I started off in academia where a large focus of what I was doing was helping people with type 1 diabetes to exercise more safely. And we were doing clinical studies looking at what nutrition impacted glucose, different technologies, and how they helped manage glucose or different intensities of exercise. And the way in which that information is built up is it's very challenging to do that. It takes a lot of funding on clinical trials. It also takes a lot of time to conduct these type of studies. And then what you've got to do is, after a series of years, they're kind of accumulated into guidelines, which then reach healthcare practitioners or the patient themselves. And one problem that we saw there was that it was very difficult to apply that information on a single person point of view, by which I mean that you as an individual living with diabetes don't necessarily respond in the same way as somebody else who has diabetes, and also applying what has been shown in a study doesn't necessarily apply to you, because those studies are oftentimes performed under quite artificial situations. Often the participants have not eaten beforehand. It's very controlled in the way that their glucose is managed. So it's not taking into account the day-to-day variability that occurs. The other motivation behind this is that I'd been working with a lot of very athletic people with type 1 diabetes, people who wanted to do sport and compete on a professional level, and really identified there that it was a trial and error approach that these individuals are having to apply every single time, meaning that they were basically having to be responsible for tracking their own data, coming up with their own approach to do this. There wasn't a single system whereby people were able to sort of accumulate knowledge to help the next person or even to help themselves in the future to train and compete more easily. So on a very simplistic level, you see that if you could put together the information from glucose monitors alongside the exercise data, people would have better clarity on how to train, how to react during and after sport, so that then they can be more physically active, because it's so important to be active if you're living with diabetes.
Far as I know, actually, not far away, you released a book. Its name is Empowered, right? For the people who has type 1 diabetes and actually how better to exercise and to stay more active.
Yeah, I mean, I have a copy here. The motivation behind this as well was very much falling in line with the thesis of what we want to do in Enhanced. So it's about making the information accessible to real people. So we realized that we had a lot of knowledge about exercise physiology, type 1 diabetes, and there wasn't a single resource where people could find this all in one place in a kind of accessible way without looking through lots of medical journals. This also applied to clinicians as well. Rather than looking through lots and lots of papers, we decided it would be much more simple for them to have a single book that was affordable, just available like on Amazon, which contained information about everything to do with sports and type 1 diabetes. The other thing here that I was interested in, and there's not too many people who are focused on this as well, is how you apply aspects related to sports science with type 1 diabetes. A lot of people involved in clinical research and work around type 1 diabetes are looking just around how do we help people start exercising? How do we help people reach the minimum recommendations? But I've always been fascinated by the question of what if you want to compete and go much further than that? And if there are athletes that you're competing against who do not have diabetes, there are all kinds of concepts that they are able to apply to their training, their nutrition. They can completely take for granted blood glucose management, whereas if you're living with type 1 diabetes, the glucose management always has to be at the start. So by understanding factors such as how you can do carbo loading, how you can adjust the training and nutrition based on where you are at the point of the season, how you take into account different types of carbohydrates into fueling to meet the demands of the performance that's required alongside glucose management is incredibly challenging, but it's something that if you get it right, it can really have a big impact on your performance, your quality of life, and just your health in general.
You just mentioned this that people take it for granted. So, and if you don't have like any problem with it, of course you don't think that much about it. But when I found even your product and even opened it for the first time, so I was stuck a little bit because I saw a lot of different titles, names which I have not ever seen before. Of course, it just due to the reason that I did not experience this in my life. For me, it also was, some kind of question if you diagnosed with the diabetes and do you plan like maybe, to have some kind of onboarding inside the application as well, because the first thing for me and what I really like about your application, first of all, it will be like a community in the future, right? And from my point of view, the community is like a real power for different layers of people, for different groups, because sometimes we are a little bit afraid to talk about something, especially if it's related to your health. But when you are surrounded around people who has exactly the same issue and you share experience and also could see that, okay, this person actually could be really active and he is exercising a lot. So basically I understand that, okay, so I can do something and I can do the same.
It's still early stage on what it is. This is something that we will aim to incorporate. The problem has been that we're bringing out a new build roughly every 3 weeks with new things. We're going to wait until the product kind of settles down a bit, or at least until we can expand the team a little bit to put clearer information. However, one of the things, I mean, we haven't had too much of a problem on the key customers that we've focused on, because people with type 1 diabetes are very used to looking at data, and they're very used to these kind of concepts. So things like millimoles per liter, milligrams per deciliter, concepts around time in range, this kind of thing. When you're first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it's a huge learning curve of all of these different concepts that you have to adjust to, all of the metrics related to glucose monitoring, how that impacts in different stages such as that. The way that the app is currently is at a level that we feel is understandable for those kind of advanced users. But for sure, our aim in the mid to long term is to ensure that this is accessible to everybody. So that will be part of the onboarding, that will be part of providing the education about what these different things mean, and just making sure that they're there. And then the second thing that you were saying about like the community and things like that, that's really important. That's part of what we want to do. I would say really as part of Enhanced, we see that there are three main pillars, and this is all around kind of supporting people with diabetes to exercise. The first one is data access, understanding the data, having availability to that, and then having actionable insights from that. And then the second part is education. So we're actually building features at the moment whereby we'll encourage educational groups who are creating very high quality diabetes and exercise education materials that will go through. And we anticipate that this can be matched up with the exercise that you've done. So for example, if your blood glucose responds in a certain way, rather than just seeing the response, you can actually gain insight into why that is happening. And that will help people to make more informed decisions, but also just understand physiologically why something is happening so that they can adjust their training or nutrition, whatever, accordingly. And then the third thing is community. So type 1 diabetes, I mean, I don't live with type 1 diabetes myself. This is really important. But I know a lot of people who do, and my real motivation is to help this, because it's a very, very challenging condition to live with. And from the conversations that I've had with people, nobody will ever understand what you're going through unless the other person is living with type 1 diabetes themselves. Even many people that I've met will say even their partners, family members, best friends, they never understand really the full extent of what they're having to go through on a daily basis. If you can connect people more easily by combining sports, which is very community driven, with type 1 diabetes, you can help people to find the support on both angles, finding sports clubs that they want to be a part of, or just information. Because the knowledge base that is contained within the community of people living with type 1 diabetes for years and years, all of this experience is such a valuable asset. And by enabling people to help each other to better understand their data, find other people who can support them, then you're just going to encourage more people to be active. And that's what we want to facilitate.
I wanted to keep this question to the end for our conversation, but I also wanted to discuss the features that you actually recently released regarding the in HD world activity map. You could see the whole world map, and yeah, to see how people exercise around you, and that's pretty cool. So is it something that you like planned before, or is it idea that just come up to you and that you just decided, okay, so we just need to create this kind of interactive map because it might help people actually to stay connected, or maybe to find someone who's near the city and stuff like that? Because I just tried to find someone, for instance, in my area, and I see that currently it's nobody. But yeah, if you observe some other countries, you can see that, yeah, some people are actually exercising as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is all credit for this feature should go to Fede, Felipe, and Henry on my team. They're the ones who are really driving the product. This idea in particular was developed by Fede, and I think it's quite unique So what we, again, as I say, the product is quite early days, but what we want to do is help people to find other people that might be interested in sports as well. Also make continuous glucose monitoring more visual, create unique ways by which people might engage with that technology. That's why we've developed our glucose map, where people can map out the route that they've done, and you can see highlighted zones that you're in, which correspond to where you are with your glucose. And we think that this is important to highlight that um, it's still a huge challenge to do exercise when you're living with type 1 diabetes, but at the same time, it's possible, and that it doesn't always have to be perfect. And there's kind of a more sort of, you can be more relaxed about not always being in the green all the time. You can see that it's okay. You can learn, you can improve this in the future. And we have plans to improve the activity feed that we have. At the moment, it's a bit static, but we have some plans by which we'll make that more dynamic and link in different ways for people to create unique statuses, or to be able to link in educational materials or resources, such as podcasts that are related to type 1 diabetes and exercise. On the world map feature, one thing that always kind of, so type 1 diabetes is one of those things where if you go back a few years, the idea of people competing, doing these big kind of endurance events was seen as this huge challenge. And what we wanted to display with Enhanced is that there are thousands of people globally who are managing to do this. And we think that if you're newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it would be very powerful to be able to demonstrate to people that it's not the end of the world. You can still go for a bike ride, play football, you can still do running or whatever. It's going to be challenging, but there are thousands of people who are doing it everywhere, and this is possible. And sport forms a really good example. It's kind of one of those things where it shows that kind of you can demonstrate like that you're determined, or it requires a lot of training and things. But I feel that sport is a good example of that could be applied to, like, if you want to achieve in academia, if you want to go through university, if you want to continue through work, everything is possible living with type 1 diabetes. It's just going to take more kind of attention to managing glucose, but with the right support, you can manage that. With this, we have it so that, yeah, you can see people in your local area. We anticipate that we can encourage people to identify where local teams are so they can reach out to them, they can learn about that. And something that we plan to incorporate is where diabetes clinics or sports nutritionists, diabetes educators, they might be able to highlight themselves on the map so that people can find professionals by which they can work with to learn more. So, for example, say you're a diabetes clinic, you are at a really good standard whereby you're specializing in helping people who are interested in sports, glucose management, and diabetes. If you could highlight where you're located and people can easily find you, you can increase the number of people that are seeing you, but you can also help people to get the right level of support, which is difficult to kind of find if you're just using Google. So we have different ideas such as that.
You mentioned that you are currently like in the very beginning, just your plan actually for the next upcoming future.
Yeah, so where we are currently, we've been focusing on building something that we can release and show that there's a real need for this, both on the clinical side and the patient side, or the kind of person living with type 1 diabetes. That's what we do. We have thousands of people now using it. And so now we're in the stage of fundraising for our pre-seed. The goal is 700,000 euros or Swiss francs, where we are. I don't want to mention like too much, like exactly who we're speaking to, but we have some really good conversations that we're closing up. So cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to close this within the next couple of weeks, especially based on how these conversations are going. And we're really excited about this because we have the great foundations within the team. We built everything so far completely, like in terms of the design, the ideas, the technical aspects. And if we could just bring in a few more on the technical side to double, triple the speed so that we're bringing out new features on a weekly basis, we can start onboarding the clinics that we're already speaking to, then we can see that we can grow this quite quickly, because we already reached over 50 different countries and we didn't do very much marketing at all. So by just having this capital coming in at this stage, we're quite excited about the potential for growth on this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Back to your words regarding the clinics, because as far as I understand, you have the application, but you also have a dashboard that is for clinics. So basically, and I could reach out to you, and I have a patient who is currently using HD. Actually, I could have this kind of dashboard and use it and to monitor and track all the data for my patient.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was very important to us from the offset that we didn't want to replace doctors. In fact, what we wanted to do was really empower the doctor-patient relationship. The challenge that doctors have is that they have a very short amount of time with the patients that they speak to, and they're using all different devices and dashboards to manage the data that's coming in. So by simplifying it into one single dash, contextualizing the information that they can have a more coherent and valuable conversation with the patient, who is then able to go away and use the same system at home to support them during the 99% of the time that they're on their own. But rather than having something where it's completely novel to them when they go and see the doctor, we wanted to assist both sides. We have quite a few clinics that are very interested in doing this, both type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and their main incentive is to be able to improve the efficiency by which they're working with the data.
I understand that one thing is actually to have this kind of app and create this kind of support for people with type 1 diabetes, but it's a different question if we are talking about the clinics, because I mean that it's a really powerful tool actually to track and to be in contact with the people. And I mean, basically it means that it's two different kind of products, right? Because dashboards, it's like one thing, and application is just a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at how we adjust the look and feel for both. The dashboard is more professional looking.
Mhm.
The app, we do plan to do like kind of an uplift on it, make it look a bit fresher, but we want this to be user friendly. We also plan whereby the user can be more selective on the type of data that they receive. By that, I mean, some people love data. Some people are real kind of data nerds and they want everything. But some people, they just want the simplicity, and plans moving forward is that you'd be able to filter according to the type of user that you are. So yeah, they're different needs and products, but it's very important that you don't look to attempt to cut out the doctor. If you do that, you'll always be working against the healthcare system.
One thing that I noticed when I made my kind of research, that actually the whole application is currently free. You don't need to pay anything to use it, but you could get quite a lot of data even for now and a lot of insights. But I'm still wondering if you have any kind of monetization model right now, or do you have plans to have it in the future, or what's like the plan behind it? Because I understand that the vision itself, that's completely clear. That's brilliant. I really would like to see more. But from another side, I understand to have all this data, working with people, have a working application. You need people, you need servers, you need clouds actually to make this and to have this kind of infrastructure. Yeah, and yeah, what kind of monetization model would you like to have in the future? Or even maybe have now, but I don't actually found it.
Yeah, currently everything is free. The plan is we want to keep the dashboard completely free. We want to make it frictionless for healthcare providers to take advantage of what we're doing. The reason is that we accept that in terms of dashboards, that kind of thing, there are competitors on the clinical side. And in order to move with speed and encourage clinicians to adopt this, we need to remove all barriers so that they do that. In return, what we get is that the clinicians are going to recommend this to the patients. They're going to act as champions to say kind of, look, this is a really good system. We recommend you use the app. On the patient side, I'm going to call them patient side, app user side. what we're going to do is introduce a premium subscription. So this will be similar to something like Strava, who
Hmm.
have the free level. So we're planning to keep the current level that it is, like with the integrations, all of the other features that are currently there. The community elements, they're going to remain free. But when we start introducing the insights, the more in-depth analytics, those will be coming with a subscription. And at the moment, we feel that the product isn't at the point where we feel we can justify that. That's the reason we haven't put any paid wall on it at the moment, but we're confident that we'll be able to have these features that make it really valuable to a certain group of users that would want to have that. The other side that we're looking at and exploring is this to be used by universities and research institutions. Because, so when I was doing all of my research and studies, I would conduct clinical trials, also large cohort studies, to have a system whereby you can seamlessly collect data and then have this exported to just do your analysis would have been extremely time saving. We're planning to do this whereby universities, research institutions would pay a subscription to be able to use the platform to organize clinical trials.
Regarding the features, what feature do you currently have that you would like to release in the nearest future? So do you have something in mind already, or do you have something that you plan to release like in 1, 2, 3 weeks?
Yeah, the problem is we have so many ideas, and as I say, implementing these at the moment with the size of the team is the challenging. That's the main bottleneck. But in the short term, the next feature that we plan to release should be. I'm going to put the rest of my team under a lot of pressure, but it will be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. This will be kind of trends. And what I mean by this is that we will be able to group exercise sessions or other events such as meals and sleep and create information on what happens to your glucose during that time. So, for example, being able to build up a better picture of how your glucose responds when you go for a bike ride, and also split that up according to the duration and other factors that relate to that. So being able to have trends such as what happens when I go for a run in the morning before breakfast, what happens when I go for a run in the evening after having eaten my dinner or something like that. And this will be really valuable in terms of just helping the user to make sense of what usually happens to their data during exercise. Where we are with the roadmap is that we're trying to work on the different elements so that each part of the app doesn't get left behind too much, but it doesn't kind of become one thing or another. So the last two features that we released were focused on the community angle. They were focused on improving the kind of social elements. We're very conscious that we want to keep improving the data analytics, the interpretation of the data that's coming in, and the specific use cases for people living with type 1 diabetes. So that's what we're focusing on now. The other big feature that we plan to implement in the not too distant future will be training plan builders. So this will
Mm,
be training plans. You've probably seen these exist in other kind of sports apps, which will
yeah, yeah.
develop running plans or other kind of maybe resistance training plans. This is what we plan to do, but it will have glucose management in mind. So being able to recognize things like if you experienced a hypo the night before, perhaps alerting you to that, suggesting ways in which you might want to alter the timing of exercise in that day, or perhaps even avoiding it if there's something that came up that's sort of problematic from a glucose management point of view.
I think it's one of the features that definitely need for this type of application anyway, because it just, help people as well, especially if you don't have any experience with the sports itself or any science background, let's say, and you don't understand how to build the whole training process. It would be, yeah, pretty cool. And also for me, I'm also wondering because I understand that the application itself is actually for the people with diabetes. It's like the main focus, but also so we have different groups who's currently doing sports. It might be amateur who just exercise time by time, don't have any goals. But from another side, we have some people who is actually really are in training process. They're not professional athletes, but they're still trying to achieve some goals and to break personal records and train, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Do you have something in mind, actually, also to split the application a little bit for people who are just exercising and in order to control the glucose level, and for people who actually would like to achieve and to perform more on a higher level. Or it will be pretty the same, but based on the analytics insight and based on your activity, you will have these insights anyway.
Yeah, this is a really good question. This is something that's a big topic of internal discussion. So there are different types of users, and ultimately what we want to do is make something that helps everyone who has a glucose monitor take action from that so that they can exercise safely and effectively. So there, it could be that we want to split kind of people who are focused on really achieving competitive goals. At the beginning of when we first released the app, we actually started implementing leaderboards, adding aspects related to competition. But the feedback that we received from a lot of the early users was that it wasn't the right time to start putting that in. It would have discouraged certain users because we were making things too competitive. So we put that on hold for the time being and decided to focus on some of the other elements. However, we've received feedback from certain users saying that competition is great. They love competition. They want leaderboards, that kind of thing. So it's very likely that what we'll do is just have opt-in features for certain aspects. You want to engage with the community elements. You want to be part of a competition which is going to push you to reach your goals. That's absolutely what we want to include. But if you're newly diagnosed or you're new to exercise, your goal is to make better kind of sense or understanding from your glucose monitor, there's going to be different elements of the app that you will make use of, and you might not want to engage with those competitive elements quite so much. There might be people who want to do smaller competitions that are not quite such high level, such as work-based step counts. Often these things happen where there's like a goal to reach 10,000 steps, people put into teams. These are going to be different things which are not going to appeal to everybody. So we need to make sure that there's something that's fitting in there. Currently, kind of our power user, if you like, is the person who is very engaged with sports, somebody who's comfortable in terms of managing their glucose around exercise and has access to wearables. But the next plan will be to open this up, make it more suitable. Similar conversations will happen when we start adapting the app for people living with type 2 diabetes. This is a completely different condition in terms of what you're looking to take out of your continuous glucose monitor. Here, you're looking to really understand the relationship between physical activity and glucose. What happens when I'm active after a meal versus when I go and sit on my chair? What happens when I eat one type of food versus another? It's really about understanding those factors so that you can better manage your glucose and possibly avoid moving on to insulin therapy. This isn't quite the level of detail that someone with type 1 diabetes would require to go into.
And yeah, because for me, it's also, was a question that, let's say that I don't have a diabetes, and I know that we have some products like Super Sapiens, and I'm just wondering, I don't have a diabetes, but I would like to have some kind of insights, how my body actually reacts to the glucose and actually, maybe to track the trends. So basically, I could still use your application, put all the meals that I'm eating, connecting to the Strava to have all the exercise, and still I will get the insights about my glucose level. I could better understand that, okay, I should sleep more or I should recover better.
No, you're right in the fact that there are a number of companies that have gone down the route of trying to market continuous glucose monitors as either sports-based device or kind of metabolic health based products. Our focus and mission has always been about helping people to make sense of the glucose monitor for diabetes.
Mhm.
We see that people are offered these great tools, oftentimes on health insurance. So, for example, many countries across Europe, people access CGM as part of their health insurance. But so by maintaining purely digital, we can help to augment what people are getting from that information. And by working with people with type 1 diabetes, we're able to help a group who really have a need today. They also have a lot of education around glucose as well. They already know what these different metrics mean. They know where they need to be. They just need more context and also assistance in making sense of the data. And the price point is really accessible because they have access. Whereas on the other end of the kind of spectrum of going straight to the sports performance, somebody who doesn't have type 1 diabetes, the problem that I see is that we just don't have enough information on what people should be looking for or aiming for. If you don't live with diabetes, if you don't have diabetes, there's not really any way you can really manipulate what your glucose is. You can't lower your glucose. You're not taking insulin. In fact, you don't really want to, other than if you do exercise. You can adjust your meals, but the reason that you would want to consistently use one of these monitors all of the time, the use case isn't really there as far as I can see, although I believe it will come eventually. The other thing is just the massive educational barrier that currently exists, having to teach people what millimoles per liter is, what the kind of ranges mean, especially when we don't have that information. On top of that, the cost that's associated with paying for these sensors and accessing them. So there are these companies that exist. Our focus is really helping type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes.
I think it's my favorite question, but what advice would Sam Scott give to anyone who is currently building a product in health, fitness, or sports industry? What would be your advice to any startup that's currently trying to build something?
Yeah, so we think about this, and I'm not saying that I definitely have all of the answers because but one thing is like constantly speak to the people that you're aiming to have the product for. We have numerous feedback groups. We have WhatsApp groups where we're constantly asking for feedback on features. We always try to respond to the messages related to what could work better before releasing different features. We always try to gauge people's kind of how they feel and how they would react to it, because it's important for us to actually be creating a solution that's going to help people. I think it kind of goes back to the question you said before about trying to have a solution to fit a problem that doesn't really exist. We're really trying to identify what our customers' problems are and then make sure that we're fixing them so that we can gradually build something that people will genuinely want to recommend, that all of their friends or their contacts use, and this will help us to grow the product, leading to this sort of virtuous cycle.
Yeah, thank you for your thoughts, for your feedback. That's really good, and I'm just looking forward, to be honest, to what you will be building in the next couple of months, years, because I think that these types of product like yours is really helpful and useful for people, and especially with the increasing numbers of information, AI. I think that we are currently, on the stage where application like yours could significantly improve the quality of life for the people with diabetes. And I'm personally really wish you a good luck.
Thank you. That's really nice. I appreciate it. That's kind. Yeah, I mean, my team and I, we're relentlessly pushing to try and get this out, and we really want to make something that's not only going to help, but can be something that has features that people find really cool and they want to engage with it and they become more active, and all of these elements around sort of having that healthy incorporation of physical activity, the relationship with data, so that it doesn't become too overwhelming. It just becomes something that can sort of fit into your life, but without becoming the forefront of your life. That's something that we want to make sure that we always have within the product.